for Matt, okay, let's just start off with an editing question. What does the editor of the Animac do? Who comes up with it in the first place?
Okay, so I guess we'll just go through kind of the process, but
Yeah,
basically we're the part of the process right after the storyboard panels have been pitched
mhm.
to the show creator. So the show creator has signed off on the storyboard panels, and then basically what we receive after that, and every show is a little bit different, but I'll kind of be a little more general. But basically, we'll receive a script of the dialogue, and we'll get all the storyboard panels. And so basically, what we'll do on most shows is we will have to do what we call scratch dialogue. So we'll record either ourselves, or if the show creator wants to do it, or the show creator likes certain people in the crew doing different voices, we'll just do a temp record of all the voices. And then what we'll do is we'll have a PDF guide that's like Storyboard Pro. Every show I've worked on has used Storyboard Pro in the storyboarding process, and they'll print it out that basically shows us where the camera moves go, where, like, if they've planned out acting, like if we have like 5 different acting panels, it'll say what word each one goes with. So we kind of have a rough guide of where things have to go. And so then what we'll do is so studios either use Adobe Premiere or Avid Media Composer. So which in the end they both do the same thing, just different buttons. But what we'll do is then we'll go through and we will take each panel, and if they're walking, we have to think about how many frames each one of those walking panels needs to be in order to let the character leave screen not too fast. Because we're thinking about we're thinking about cartoons you've seen before. You're thinking about like you're thinking about what kind of cartoon you're making. Like, is it a goofy cartoon or is it like a serious drama? So we'll go through, and then you'll do the same with jokes. Like if a character we're deciding if jokes are awkward, like long awkward silences, or quick jokes. What's funniest. So
for us, it depends on the show, but we've both worked on shows where if it's a comedy, things are way more fast paced. There's no breathing room in between the dialogue. They kind of just run right into each other. And then we've worked on other shows that are a bit more dramatic and serious, and they're just like, we want breathing room, really stretch this out. That was definitely for Star. I think that's probably for Owl House, right?
Owl House wants
a lot more breathing room.
They like a lot more breathing room. They want it to be like really cinematic.
Yeah, and I'm on Kid Cosmic at Netflix, and that's definitely, they really want breathing room atmosphere. Yeah.
So basically we'll time it. We'll put temporary sound effects. Every studio has given us like a temporary sound effect library, massive library. So we'll go through, do sound effects, which also help the timing, and then we'll go through and we'll do temporary music to help solidify the tone that we think needs to go there. So then after that, we will send that to our directors, who will give us notes. We'll eventually we'll apply those notes. We'll work on story changes, like with them. We'll bring that to the show creator, supervising directors, supervising producers, and then we'll kind of all become happy. Send that to the studio. The studio execs will then give us a couple notes, and then when that's done, then it's shipped off to the animation studio, where, like in Owl House's case, it's in Korea. So they'll send it to Korea, where it gets animated, and then when it comes back, it goes to a different editor. They call it like a picture editor.
Yeah,
we'll just get the footage that we timed out, and we usually time it a little longer than the shipping time, than the actual air time, so that the post editor, if they when they go in there, if the show creator decides one joke's not working or a moment's not working, they have room to cut that out and still have enough footage to air.
Yeah. Actually, here's a big difference for you at Disney and me at Netflix. With you at Disney, you have time limits and time, this has to be, is Owl House a half hour?
It's a half hour, yeah.
Okay, so you have to be exactly 22 minutes in your episode.
Yeah.
Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
This is the first time I've worked on a show, but going to Netflix, and we don't have to worry about time limits at all, which is really nice to not have to worry about being at a specific time. Some episodes are 22, some are 25, some are 15 minutes. It's just for what feels right for the story. So that's a nice breath of fresh air. But because I remember it would be sometimes a little difficult having to get exactly to 11 or 22 minutes, and we have to add oh my God, 10 frames short. Okay,
Yeah.
just go through and add 2 frames here, add 2 frames there.
Or like they're in love with every single moment, and they,
Yeah,
it's like a big thing of
yeah, and you
going
have
back
to
and
cut
forth and what
stuff.
we can take and what they're missing everything. Um,
I just happen to see this, Carmen. Yes, we most shows have assistant editors. And what do they do for us? Usually, sometimes an assistant editor will build the episode, and the animatic editor just handles the timing and the director notes.
mhm,
But most of the time, an assistant editor will kind of do like they'll do like exports, scene numbering.
mhm.
They'll just help pick up slack if the animatic editor is crazy busy.
Yeah,
What else does a
and
assistant
at,
do?
at Disney, the assistants they make they always become assistant picture editors.
Oh, they assist the
So
post editor too.
they'll be in charge of cutting in all the new footage that comes in,
Hmm.
and doing exports, and sometimes they'll run little sessions. They'll
Hmm.
design, like the designers will come in and review things to see if they need to update like backgrounds or something, and they'll run those little sessions sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So basically, animatics is pretty much after storyboards is kind of building the skeleton of the show. From Eric, so in animatic editing, are you timing the jokes and the visual sequences, or do you already have the radio play by then? We're timing out the jokes and the and sequences and how the length of how stuff rolls. Matt actually mentioned that he starts off when he's building the episode. He starts off with scratch vocals. I've actually only found that to be at Disney TVA shows. When I at Nick or Netflix, the vocals, actually the dialogue from the voice actors are already given to us, and we start building the episode with already having the voice actor dialogue. Sylvester asks, any advice for people who want to build a storyboard animatic portfolio? What are some of the do's and don'ts that you've learned in your career so far? I have never built an editing portfolio just simply because I've never been asked for one. Uh, but I have been asked as of lately, uh, the last couple jobs. I've had people ask to either see a reel or just like a clip of some of the last stuff I worked on.
Yeah.
So that's just a matter of just grabbing, the QuickTime file and
Yeah.
sending it to them.
Yeah, doing a reel. If you have a few shows that you worked on, a few things you've done,
Hmm.
I've been asked to do a reel once or twice, and I put them on Vimeo where it tracks who's watching it,
Yeah.
and they've never had a single watch. So, because to me, like it's good to know during an interview, it's good for them to know like your personality. I think that's the best thing because they need to sit in a room with you all day.
Hmm.
But the whole idea of like checking out a reel is it's always been a little ridiculous to me because we're like the final product has gone through so many note sessions
Yeah.
and so many different things, executive notes, director notes, show creator notes, that like a lot of it you can't, like if it's good, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm good, or if it's bad, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm bad. So I've made them. I've been asked to make them like a couple times, and really all you need to do is I like to try to find like a comedy scene that you've done and a more actiony kind of scene that you've done,
Yeah.
and it could be
Have
from
a.
the same, could be from the, if you've only done like one thing, like
Mhm.
one pilot or one episode of something, if you can kind of find like one scene of each, and then
Mhm.
just put them next to each other on a reel with a little card that just says like, could even just say like actiony scene,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also keep the reels short. That's the other thing. You don't have to
Yeah.
spend
Keep it short.
because nobody, if they actually were watching these things, they're not going to want to sit through more than like 2 minutes.
Don't do a 20-minute editing reel.
Yeah.
Have lots of examples if you can, but have them all be short.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, variety is best. Have a little comedy sequence that you edited, have an action sequence,
And
drama.
I'll also say if you're trying to break into animatic editing and somebody asks you to do a reel, one thing we could talk about is if you can find panels, of like maybe a little bit of an example sequence, just
Sure.
cut it on your own,
Yeah.
and then you can have it. It doesn't have to be something that's aired on TV.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be something that you've even worked on.
Yeah.
Try to find
I told several
panels
people,
find Adventure Time storyboard panels and build a
yeah.
sequence yourself and show them how you can do it.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yeah.
like all those will have like and if you have any questions about this, I mean, it should be pretty self-explanatory. Like it should have the camera guides and and things like that. And it's a great way to like just even see if you're interested in animatic editing, just to find like that's a great call, Nico. Like finding like Adventure Time panels and just doing it to see if like just cut like 10-20 seconds to see if you're even interested in it.
Mm-hmm. The very first thing I ever edited, I got a couple minutes in, I'm like, I love this. Like, I think this is what I want to do.
Yeah, especially once you start putting in sound effects and music, it's like you're creating the show like that.
Yeah.
Because what'll happen is the moment you start doing sound effects and music, you'll retime again.
Yeah.
So like the first pass with the dialogue, you know, you're doing what you think. You're getting kind of close. You're getting like 80% there. But then
I play the sound effect in my head of what I think the sound effect might sound like.
Exactly. And then when you actually put it in there, sometimes it's funnier to let it I mean, I always say funnier, but sometimes it works well when you let the sound effect ring out, because maybe that's a nicer moment when the character, maybe it's an action show and a character like flies down, slams into the ground, and you want to let that like, after that, like that hit, you want to let that taper off. And so you'll re-edit things, retime, and it'll just get better and better. And it's pretty fun. For anyone interested in animatics, like all of my interview experiences were that a lot of them don't know what to ask us. So the first thing they'll ask, they'll look at your resume, and if you've done something else they recognize, they'll say, okay, good. And you know how to use the program. Basically like, you're not a moron. You can, you're in a safe place, answer it. So then you say you're not a moron, and then you end up just like shooting the breeze. Like it ends up just being like just hanging out. That's how it's been.
Exactly.
They usually look at each other, do the same thing. They look at each other and then they say, oh, what else do we ask an animatic editor?
From Yorick, a question for Matt. I'm an animation student who always focuses on character design and storyboard in the past. I'm not very familiar about post-production of animation. Can you explain more about the responsibility of editing? In my understanding, all of the rhythm and camera angles are decided in the storyboard part. So besides the content you mentioned in the beginning of the course, what can an editor do to make the final work better after the storyboard and animation is done?
Well, the one thing that I've always found really interesting in animation is every step of the process is fixing something, because something, and that's not saying anyone's doing anything wrong. It's just things don't interpret from one stage to the next. So like, for instance, most shows I go on, they'll write the scripts. If it's a scripted show, a lot of times, most of the time the script reads beautifully. Like everyone's really excited about the script. And then the storyboard artists, and you can tell me if this reminds you of anything, but like the storyboard artists will then read that, and as they're boarding, a lot of times certain things that are written don't translate. So the storyboard artist now has to like figure out how characters move from one scene to the next. If it felt like the script might have had them like blink to another location, and the storyboard artist will have to figure out how that logically visually makes sense.
Gotcha.
There might be like gags that are really funny to read, but in reality, when the character has to move through that gag, it's slow and not fun. So the board artist will then, adapt, change it to make it work. And then the same thing happens when it goes to animatics. So the beauty of animatics is once you see it all moving with sound effects and how things are, a lot closer to how it's going to look when it's animated, a lot of times, like I'd say over half of it will need tweaking. Like never too much, but it's a nice way to see, like, especially when you're boarding, a lot of times you think you're doing enough panels, especially if you're doing an action scene. You always think you're doing enough, or you're covering the key frames. But once you put it in animatic, you'll start to notice like this does not make sense. Like,
or we need, we're missing a lot of stuff.
Yeah, or like it's not as cool. You might notice that's not the, not the type of action you're going for. Like even if it's cut in the animatic, if it's timed very quickly, it still might not translate. Like your brain might not be catching it. So that's sort of the beauty of animatics, is that like you start to see what's really there.
It's polishing everything, and it's getting everything as good as it can possibly be before it goes to animation.
Yeah. So like that's like I've had I've worked with directors that really pushed for their storyboard artists to sort of put together like a rough animatic like in Storyboard Pro, because he was noticing that that with like, especially with action scenes, his board team would just miss a lot. Like it would come to animatics, and that we would constantly have, the revisionists would have to do a lot of work. So animatics will help you do that. And then not to mention like, the one thing that we do in animatics is it's easy to find waste. So sometimes if you're doing, if you're storyboarding a script and the script has a lot of dialogue, and in the script, it felt like you needed that. in the animatic, you'll watch it and you'll see repetitive moments.
Yeah, yeah.
The character doing the same thing several times, and in the animatic, we can easily cut that. Not to mention, we can even combine scenes. We can do a lot in animatics where you don't necessarily have to go back and redraw anything. Like sometimes, you know, the shots are there. We just need to cut out the middle shot, and it actually works just fine cutting from this character to suddenly over here, a close up of a different character. Yeah. And we've lost, you know, 10 seconds of dialogue that was just a waste.
That's a great point. You find out that sometimes you don't even need as much as you thought you needed.
Yeah.
And like you can just cut out a whole middle shot, and it makes it even better. From Sylvester, he's asking about the sound effects and music that we use in our animatics. Any royalty-free music or sound effects used in animatics?
Yes.
I think it's usually all temp. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter what we use.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So like, yeah, we have freedom. Like a lot of times, like I'll have directors that actually every so often they'll want something specific, and I'll just get it on YouTube. Yeah. And stuff that you recognize, but then after, so once it's animated and the post editor, the picture editor has it, they'll eventually send it to a post-production sound house, and they'll have and they have a composer. So a composer comes in.
Every show will have a composer.
Does all the sound effects. Like, you know, at Disney, probably the same at Nickelodeon and Netflix, but Disney owns their sound library. So all the sound effects that we use, they can use in the show. So sometimes the post sound house will look at what we did and keep a lot of what we did, but the music they're going to take out. They're going to make all new.
Carmen, I wrote you back in the chat, but just for the record and for everybody, they ask us, so there's an animatic editor and then a post editor, which is when animation comes back, the post editor drops in the final animation and preps everything for final export.
Yeah, and they'll do, and the final editor will do some edits. Like they'll do a lot of sessions. They do what's called retake sessions, where the whole, like, the art team will come in, and the show creator, they'll come in and they'll watch the whole thing and see what's working, what's not. And
there will be animation mistakes sometimes.
So they'll ask the studio overseas to fix things, or they have, like, at bigger studios, they have people in-house that do, actually, we should bring this up. We have a position at Disney called a technical director, and they will do reanimating. They'll reanimate, like if they change a line, they'll resync the mouth.
Instead of having Korea do it.
Yeah, sometimes it's cheaper to have this group of professionals do it.
What would be an entry-level position to become an animatic editor? Either assistant editor, or you would just start off being an animatic editor. Yeah. I started off being an animatic editor. I never was an assistant. And yeah, like I've known people that are just constantly looking for assistant editing jobs, and that's fine. But I would say the best way to get into it, because I noticed somebody else, it went by real quick, but had asked like how to like hone your skills, something like that, about how do you get better or how do you level up in animatics. And really, it's like the best, any way you can jump in, do it. You know, just because like that's just like jumping into the fire. Because the other thing that levels you up is working with directors, because you have to now deal with somebody, you know, telling you things in the room, like sitting behind you, telling you things, and you know, and you have to do it in front of them, and you want to do it fast so that they don't, you know, so they don't change their mind, or so that you're not there for too long. So that, you know, over time, that just like starts to make you faster and better with working with directors, and even suggesting things that might like avoid more notes, because sometimes they'll say what they're going for, and then they'll say, maybe let's do this, and once you get a good rapport, you can suggest like, oh, if you're going for that, like instead of adding, what if we cut this other thing? You know, we can also get closer to time. From Sylvester, what are some of the exercises that you can do as an editor to level up? I think, like we said at the beginning, you can take if you find board panels of existing shows, edit them yourself. Yeah. Like Matt did when he was really young. Like capture footage of a show you like and like re-edit it or edit it differently. Take like a comedy scene and make a horror trailer out of it. Yeah. Like just give yourself little, you know, fun little challenges and things to do.
Yeah, and also just watch lots of stuff.
Yeah,
it's like
watch lots of stuff. Yeah.
The thing that like we always do is, I mean, we've both seen, I mean, most people have seen a lot of stuff, but it's nice to like have a lot of different kinds of like cartoon styles in your head. So as you're working, you can like you can start like subconsciously just like coming up with what you kind of figure out what the board artist is going for based on like, oh, okay, I know you're kind of doing like a, I don't know, you can think of the movie reference, whatever it is, and so then you start to go, you start to build it with that tone in mind. So hopefully that answers that question.